name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Amen.
Brethren in Christ, Laudetur Jesus Christus.
And Secula.
This is Timothy Flanders. We're here today I'm joined by co-host Jeremiah Bannister, the Paleocrat.
Yes, man.
Jeremiah, how you doing, brother?
Dude, it's been a minute.
Yes, it has.
I've been
very good to be with you.
It is. It's good, man. I've missed you, dude. You know, I watch you on YouTube at night, dude, and I'll be laying there with my pillow, dude, crying in my sleep and stuff, waiting to come back. I'm like, what is he gonna
outcry? Well, Jeremiah's been busy. Yeah. His wife gave birth to Bannister number 6. Is it?
Bannister, yes, man.
Bannister number 6.
The most manly little dude that's ever been born.
Phoenix is his name.
Dude. Just say
and
that.
He was born to deliver us from the evil Marxists, and he will be a deliverer and something like that.
Yeah, he came out with a beard and a battle axe.
Yeah, there we go.
He's an amazing little guy. Yeah,
so how's wife and baby doing?
They're doing amazing, man. You know, all the kids. I mean, for one, my wife is, you know, one of the most amazing women on the planet. I would say the most, and relatively speaking, it's true. But I know you've got an amazing wife as well. You know, there's probably a lot of ladies that are pretty amazing watching the show.
So we'll bare knuckle box later about it. Don't worry.
Yeah, right. And so no, she's doing great, man. She's a real trooper. Nobody even believes, you know, when she says, "Oh, baby number 6." Nobody believes that. They're looking at her like, "Oh, you know what? You look like you're in your 20s." And so I'm pretty hooked up about that. And you know, she carries herself real well and everything. And so, you know, she was right at it, right out of the gate. I had to kind of slow her down and say, hey, you know, slow down a little bit. You know, you just had a baby and I'm the one telling her to do that. And of course, the baby's doing great, growing by leaps and bounds, you know, just a majestic little dude. And so, and the other ones are doing great too. I mean, the whole family, you know, because we have one that's almost 2, Lucian Ignatius. He's almost 2 years old now. So he's romping around. He's getting to that age where he's figured out how to get up on a stool. So we got to be really careful about the oven. He's never touched it or anything, but you got to be careful.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
Climbers.
Yeah, he's doing it. And so, but it's always a lot of fun at the Bannister home. And so
absolutely.
I love my family.
Yeah. Yes. Always fun at the Bannister home. I don't doubt it. So today's topic is, are Catholics obliged to vote for Trump? So before we go any further, please like and subscribe and share this video, because the Marxist bots are all over it. They've zeroed in on it because it had the word Trump in it. I actually changed it to red because the video was being buried so much. So please share this video. We're up against the algorithms and whatnot. So, but first, a few announcements. Tomorrow is for all patrons. We have a patron-only live broadcast, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So hopefully you can join us if you're a patron. Thank you to all our patrons for your support. If you want to become a patron, there's a link below. You can get some free books. Kennedy's new book that just came out as well. Also, 2 prayer requests that we'll offer up in our Father besides the main intention. One is the husband of one of our patrons for his conversion. The other one is our French sister, Marguerite Marie, near Versailles, which is where they are in a battle with their bishop to keep their Latin Mass. So the bishop just ordered the chapel of the hospital where they've been having the Latin Mass closed, and they were locked, and they had Latin Mass on the sidewalk with small children and pregnant women. So they are fighting for the Latin Mass. So we're going to offer up our Father as well for their fight. Shout out to all our French brethren fighting the good fight across the sea. So here we are in the United States. We've got our own problems. We did a show last week about why, in my opinion, my view, it is a sinful participation in evil to vote for Biden for various reasons. You can go watch that show. And also on Monday, I shared whom I'm voting for, and you can watch that show for that information as well. In this show, I'm going to be playing the role of devil's advocate against Jeremiah to try to prove him wrong. And on the question of, are Catholics obliged to vote for Trump? Now, what we mean by obliged, the word obliged is often used in a mortal sin sense, like the obligation to attend Holy Mass, to hear Mass on Sunday, for example, the obligation, or the obligation to assent with a divine faith to the dogmas of the faith. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about obligation. This is a lesser obligation that we're discussing today. The obligation is analogous to Pius XII, 1948, who was fighting against the communist takeover of Italy. And he said in that year that the Italian Catholics were obliged under pain of sin to vote against the communists in that time. And so what we're going to be talking about today are Catholics similarly obliged now in 2020 to vote against the Marxists of our era. So Jeremiah is going to start off with his best case, and then I'm going to go through all the best arguments that we could collect against Trump and for some other option, not Biden, but some other option. And we're going to go through those and try to debate it and try to hammer it out. As we have said before, we need to be Thomistic. When we're trying to make a decision or make an argument, we need to think of the best arguments against something in order to really hammer out the truth, making a steel man argument as opposed to a straw man argument to truly hammer out the truth. So, Jeremiah, without further ado, can you give us a breakdown of why you think Catholics are obliged to vote for Trump in 2020?
Yeah, of course. In fact, it's an honor, man. And I'm really glad that you asked me to do this. You know, I voted for the president in 2016. And in fact, it cost me my job. I worked as a independent radio guy. I did AM FM radio for most of my life. And at the time I was on a local station here in town, and it's owned by a Democrat, a very progressive, anti-Christian dude. Who, interestingly enough, I think really is almost iconic in how he symbolizes the modern Democratic Party, and even the confusion with it, because he's a super rich guy and he's, constantly mansplaining and saying he's a feminist. And so there's a lot of contradictions in that. But, the thing is that I knew when all of this was coming down. I knew, in fact, when Donald Trump came down the escalator, I anticipated the idea not only that he would win the primary, but that he would win the general election. I got a lot of flack for that. I was an atheist. Most people who are atheists are secular. Most of them are Democrats. Okay. They kind of fit in many ways a cookie cutter kind of secular liberal description. And so I was kind of out in no man's land. Many people may have seen Bill Maher, where he had Ann Coulter on the show, and he asked, in Ann Coulter's opinion, who she believed was going to win, and she said Donald Trump, and everybody laughed. When I saw that, I related to that. But I didn't just think that he could win. I wanted him to win. And I was really private about it, and didn't even talk about my vote, right? I normally have not, and for many years, I hadn't endorsed anybody publicly. It was kind of against my journalistic ideas and ethics and stuff like that. And so I didn't endorse, and I kind of keep it to myself. It ended up being revealed in a way not to do with me. Somebody else did it, and it got revealed to management, and it didn't take long. And I got a phone call saying that I was a misogynist and a bigot and everything else for this. No, admittedly, no complaints from anybody. Had zero ever, in fact, about me. But what he said, I think, is important for this conversation in general, because it's actually true. Sadly, it's not ideal. It's not what I would wish it to be. But he said that's just the nature of our political reality, and I think that that's true, because we can go through, and we are going to go through in this conversation. We're going to go through economics, talk about GDP. We could talk about over 3% in 4 quarters. I mean, that's a big deal. You could talk about the unemployment rate that the previous administration said mockingly, what does he think he'd have a magic wand? This kind of thing's impossible. Apparently he does have a magic wand. It's called Maganomics, American economics, and it works. It's wonderful. It's how he became a superpower. We could talk about pro-life. I'm sure we will. And the accomplishments that have happened under this administration, or even if someone wants to say limited, even those limited ones. And this is coming from somebody who used to work as a chief aide to the founder of New Jersey League of American Families, who he was part of the foundational level with National Right to Life. And so I worked every single day suit and tie briefcase guy in the New Jersey Capitol in Trenton, New Jersey, speaking with people and trying to advocate for the unborn. And not just the unborn, not just anti-abortion. I'll admit right now that I believe that there's a meaningful distinction between somebody who's anti-abortion and pro-life. We could talk about healthcare, about whether it's the individual mandate or whether it's making drug prices cheaper, whether it's the right to try, whether it's veterans. We could talk about that. Immigration and the things that were done with immigration, stuff like Voice, the victims of immigration crime engagement, how many arrests were made by ICE, the executive order that disqualified sanctuary cities from receiving federal funds, even the idea that someone would be doing this and the reasons for that, by the way. We could talk about all of those things, military, the fact that we have no new expansion of war. I think Rand Paul did a really great job talking about this, that you have a president who's bringing people back. He's saying that we're going to bring even more back, wants them to come home. Even the gesture and the way that he speaks, the way he postures himself against the military industrial complex is historically remarkable. Very few people have done it. And of those who did, one was on his way out and one of them got shot in the face. And so that's, it's a scary thing to do. And this is what he's been doing. We can talk about energy. You can talk about lobbyists and the bans that he's put on lobbyists. And I know this, as I said, I worked for one. So I've seen how lobbyists work. I've seen the pressure game and I know how this operates. Education, the expansion of choice, specifically that the historical Black colleges and the money that they've been receiving and the support that they've been receiving, unprecedented levels. Veterans, which is really important to me. That's something that, to me, I'm a veteran of the United States Navy. A lot of my friends are veterans. I have family that served in the military. They're veterans. And to see, after all these years, I've been a disabled veteran since 2002. And for years of my life, and people can go on, I host a show, Paleocrat Diaries. I talk a lot about this stuff every day.
Linked below, by the way.
Linked below. I'm on every weekday, 10 to noon. Okay. That's a thing I do. Been busy. But I talk a lot about veterans over the years. I've made even a mini documentary that I made for journalists. It's, I think 20 minutes or so. And it's my experience having something that I predicted would be a really easy thing to fix. And I'd probably be given antibiotics and maybe some kind of, naproxen or something like that. And that they made me go from Grand Rapids to about an hour and 15-minute drive to Battle Creek. It ended up being way crazier than that. And seeing how many hospitals we'd have to pass by just so that I could get care and take my kids out of school, and predicted before we even picked them up, it was like around noon, that we wouldn't be back until midnight. And lo and behold, that happened. And so I've talked about this globalism and the fight between a global new world order and nationalism, properly speaking, a nationalism that takes pride in national sovereignty and patriotism. We could talk about that, and the fact that he goes to the United Nations and he doesn't play the game of these New World Ordites, these venomous people. He doesn't do that. He doesn't play this game, and even the posturing toward the fake news. As a journalist, somebody who went to school for journalism, there's a reason why I never got into wanting to be on a big TV network or wanting to be on a big radio network or wanting to be involved with print news, because I loathe fake news. I've hated it. I hated it in J school. I've hated it my entire life. And I've watched as politicians over and over and over play this game. So to see the way he postures himself every single day, and knowing, as imperfect as he is, that he's every day knowing that when he wakes up, that he's going to be bombarded from every single corner of the planet, and he's going to keep marching on with a smile on his face. And that's what's going to happen. And you need somebody like that. So we could do that. Critical race theory, right? We could talk about all of these things, but the truth is, I think that this is a paradigm matter, because I sincerely, in my heart of hearts, I believe that right now that we are in a cold civil war. And I don't take that lightly. I'm not using that in a way that's being sensationalistic. You can go to Hillsdale. You can go, there's numerous different colleges that have professors, Princeton, that talk about this and say, strictly speaking, if we want to understand kind of the nature of the divide that we have in this country and where we are, we really do fit this description of having a cold civil war right now. And that is extremely dangerous. And it's easy for a lot of people to go about their lives as if everything is normal, but it's not. It's not. And we're at a place where maybe no other place, definitely in our lifetimes, but maybe in the lifetime of our country, where we are at a repent or perish moment. And to have where you need to take a knee for Jesus, where it's gotten so bad at every level, every institutional sphere in our country, from the top all the way to the bottom, is being ravaged by sin and by ideas regarding not only the idea of man and what we are and what our end is, but how to get there. And what is morality? Who are men and women? What is marriage? What's human life? What is just? What is unjust? And to say these are so big, and we've gotten to a point where it's really difficult to speak to each other, that it really does require, and this is to wrap it up, it requires an icebreaker. And by icebreaker, I mean the boat, right? The boat that cracks through huge sheets of ice and spreads it out so that supply ships can come in behind it and make sure that it can get to its destination. The thing is that boat is rough. It's got a rough and tumble, man, going through those sheets of ice. It is beat up and gnarly looking. It has to be hard, so it's not going to just end up sinking, right? Doing a Titanic thing. You don't want to have that. And I believe that that's him. And what is it? Victor Hansen, historian, and talking about Trump as a tragedian, right? He's a character of tragedy, that he's not going to go down in history. You're not going to have a bunch of people like him. He really is just him. But that him, who he is, including the faults, and that's why I won't defend the things about him that I think are wrong. I don't embrace every single policy, and we'll talk about this a little bit. But at the same time, even some of those things that ordinarily for that office of the president would be faults, I believe are not just strengths, but necessary in order to preserve our republic. And I think that because of that, and because the nature of where we are right now, that we need to absolutely vote for President Trump in 2020.
Okay, so let me take your final point first, because that's kind of the overarching context of everything. It's an epochal moment. So some Catholics may say, well, the American Republic is just some secularist, Masonic, whatever deist experiment. It has nothing to do with the social teaching of Christ. It needs to be scrapped. We need to reset. So why don't we just stop voting and just let it die, and so we can restart? Abraham Lincoln said he wanted to keep this union forever, so that the union shall not perish from the earth. But the Nicene Creed says that his kingdom is the only kingdom which will not perish. So we're trying to prop up this secular government. Why don't we just let it die? Why do we need to vote for Trump to try to preserve this secular, paltry republic?
Because we're not nihilistic crazy people. And because we're Catholic. And because we believe in the common good. Because we believe in doing things that will bring about justice, that we play a role like the leaven, okay? That we are the leaven in this dough of society at large. And it's not just a political program, okay? I know I saw some people in the comment thread. You got a pretty wild comment thread, by the way. you got a really engaging Facebook page, man, and Twitter account, man. And so people got to go see it. But that a lot of individuals were saying that so much focus on the political dynamic of this has made it so that there's not as much of an emphasis anymore on the religious dynamic of this. And I think that is tragically true. I think it's a sign of the time a little bit, but I think it's not an irreversible thing. I mean, if we can diagnose that, we can. It's an easy fixer. Okay, you just gotta simply talk it out with some people and reorient them and say, okay, let's turn you a little bit, buddy, away from this. And so, but because we're Catholic, and talking about America specifically, yes, there are a lot of things about America that can be rightly criticized. At the same time, I think that Pope Leo, the 13th, in his letter to the United States, I think it's powerful. I think that people who criticize the United States as a the entire thing and say, oh, It was Masonic in its origin, and there's an argument to that. I've advocated for people to read. In fact, when Tim Gordon was on the show, I asked him if he ever read the book Political Polytheism by Dr. Gary North, and he makes that charge. But even if that's true, let's say his entire thesis is completely true, and it's very well documented and stuff. So let's say it's completely true. Pope Leo XIII still wrote what he wrote.
And just for viewers, you're talking about Longiqua, right?
Yes, I'm not as
Benevolentate.
Yeah, I'm not as good at Latin, so I don't even try.
So just for viewers, there's two encyclicals from Pope Leo to the United States. Yeah. One is Longiqua, where he basically praises the United States and Washington, but says, well, we don't like how your separation of church and state. That's not good. And then later, but Testem Benevolentate, I believe that's 1898, if I'm not mistaken. That's the one where he criticizes Americanism as an idea, which is more of a French creation, but it is also related to America, obviously. So just for viewers' sake, to clarify that.
Yeah, and the first one, even the one talking about separation of church and state, even that, yes, to me, that is the way that Catholics have to approach this, is to say, look, follow the lead of the pontiff. And I don't know why he's not a saint right now. I love him, man. He's amazing pope. But anyway, the thing is that you look at it and you say it's a qualified praise and a qualified critique. And it balances things out and says, okay, what are the good things? Let's praise that. Let's praise the freedom that Catholic people have and to participate in the public square. And a lot of people now might treat that as, well, that means in politics. Yes, but a lot more than that. Okay. And that Catholics were to have a robust involvement in the political economy, which would include politics in general, and being that sanctifying force within your nation that is used as a tool of Jesus Christ in order to subject all things to Christ the King. And that would include in the United States. And what's amazing is that with few obstacles, right? Few foundational constitutional obstacles, this country affords Catholics a remarkable ability to do that. And because we have that, and we have the access to that, and we have the mandate by Christ to do that, I believe we need to do that.
Okay. Now, what about the more obvious common objection that Trump is a godless playboy in an invalid marriage to a Catholic woman? So he's a public adulterer, and he has lowered the level of public discourse to the level of school children. I don't want to vote for him for that.
Yeah. Well, let's take the first thing first. I'm not a, what is it, political donatist, right? I don't believe that politicians, that we have to be like, well, this person is upstanding in all ways. In fact, to be very frank about this, when we get to a level of someone who is running for president, and you hear this criticism a lot with Trump, and they say, well, he's a megalomaniac, he's a narcissist. Presidential psychiatrists and psychologists will tell you that they all are, okay? Because if you are the kind of person that believes that either God called you for that moment, which may be true, but you have to get to that point where you're like, yes, Lord, I think I'm supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. Like if you are at that place where you're even thinking that might be your destiny in life, there's a good chance that you're not Johnny Q or Sally Sue Public, that you're somebody who has this idea of yourself. And a lot of times, not just that, but that in all likelihood, you are also wealthy, powerful, and have a degree of fame, or you're involved because you may have people, you say, look, this guy is, really good. And they're living an upright life. They're married to the same person their entire life. And they may have wicked beliefs. I think that it's one of those things where good people can have bad ideas and bad people can have good ideas. And depending on the circumstance that you're dealing with in your society, and depending on the opposition that you're dealing with at that time, there may be a compelling reason to vote for somebody who's an otherwise not morally outstanding person. I think some of that is overblown. I think his love for his family, whether it's in a adulterous relationship or not. And we're, as Catholics, we're in a unique place with this, by the way, especially not just in the United States, but around the world, but maybe especially in the United States, the way that we view marriage, the way that we view remarriage. And so I think that we have to be in a way, generous with our surroundings and realize maybe it's not too much different than finding yourself at a time where a majority of the dudes have harems. And you're like, don't vote for him. He has a harem. And you're like, dude, everybody has like 4 wives. Okay. And so you have to understand the circumstance. And so, and as for the public discourse, I think it's brilliant. By and large, I do have, I don't sit there and say, oh, I love the way he talks on everything that he does, like, oh, every tweet he does is dope. I'm going to retweet that to all my friends. But at the same time, as somebody who's done public speaking, whether the study of homiletics for preaching when I was a Protestant pastor, Nick can learn more about that with your interview with me, or public speaking. I've done speeches at universities and everything else. If you're not doing a lecture and you're speaking to the average person and you are a populist and you're reaching out to average people, then the level of that discourse should be similar to the level of writing that is done and that journalists are trained to do in journalism school. And that is 4th grade. So if you want to say he talks like a 4th grader, you go, yeah, that's what we're taught in journalism school. And so the idea is because the audience you're trying to reach out to, that's the case. And so, and it seems to be effective with big time world leaders as well, with the amount of pressure that he's put on them and the kind of peace talks that he's done, and even the nominations for the Nobel Prize. And so people can rip on him for that all day long. It doesn't bother me.
Okay. How about this? Trump is not really pro-life. He just pays lip service. Everybody knows the Republican Party has been paying lip service to pro-life issues for decades. They just do it to get elected. Trump's not the real deal. He doesn't really care about really ending child murder. His administration has continued to have the largest federal funding of Planned Parenthood. His the COVID-19 bailout went to Planned Parenthood. He's not the real deal. It's just all lip service.
Well, I find this an interesting thing. I used to work in I used to work as chief aide to a lobbyist, and abortion was one of our main things, right? So pro-life, gun rights, taxes, school choice. In fact, that is kind of your traditional conservative beliefs, which is, interestingly enough, Trumpism. But the thing is that I remember I was commissioned at that time in 2004 to investigate and dig up, do muckraking stuff on the Democrats to find out their, involvement with abortion, which is, it's like hitting the broadside of a barn. It's super dupe easy to do. So you go online, you're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to find out what do they think about abortion. It's all over the place. So I go on, I'm looking it up. And at the time I stumbled on a lot of websites that were talking about George W. Bush and abortion. And I know a lot of people, even right now, for example, who back in 2004 were hardcore about George W. Bush. And to this day, they're like, I miss W, man. I miss the way that is. And those same people don't even realize that what they're saying of Donald Trump was exactly what I was finding out about George W. Bush, right? And by the way, I don't even believe all that stuff that you just said about Donald Trump, and I'll tell you why in a second. But the thing is that when I brought this up, and I compiled a long list, and in stuff with LGBT, by the way, a whole bunch of stuff. We could talk about him in his Bohemian Grove connections. We won't do that. But the thing is that when I brought this up, these bigwigs, right, Republicans, sat there and they were very stern. And they said, we're in the cafeteria at the State House. And they told me, they said, you're not allowed to ever talk about this, ever. And I looked at them, I said, we go into churches all the time. And we talked to them. And I said, do you believe that if he's elected president, reelected, do you believe that we are going to really make any significant headway in the whole abortion thing at all? And they just looked me right in the eye and said, no. It was the most almost like hard-hearted thing. Because these are the same people that will meet with pastors and shake hands and stuff, and priests and shake hands and act and do all the optics and stuff.
For George W. Bush's election.
For George W. Bush, yes. And they told me, they said, if you go public with this at all, you will never have a job for the rest of your life in New Jersey politics, ever. And so I went home and I wrote a letter to the biggest newspaper in the state, and I put my name on it. And I said where I worked, and I never had a job in New Jersey politics for the rest of my life. And so that's just what happened. And so, but the thing is, so this is something that's not new. At the same time, let me just read this out. And people can actually find this. I don't know if it's Priest for Life. There's a whole long list of this stuff, and you can even find it, of course, on his own campaign website. First week in office, reinstated and expanded the Mexico City policy, preventing $9 billion in foreign aid from being used to fund the abortion industry. New guidance for infants surviving abortion. Appointed pro-life federal judges. Even if people want to criticize certain judges and go, oh my gosh, well, look, they didn't vote as I thought they would. Okay. If that's what they want to make the argument, they're very narrowly focused on this and not seeing this as a nationwide campaign with tons of federal judges. Planned Parenthood announced its withdrawal from the Title X program. If Planned Parenthood was just banking loot, and Planned Parenthood's like, dude, he's rocking it for us, we're getting historic levels, they would not leave Title X. And that's just a fact. President Trump defunded a UN agency for colluding with China's brutal program of forced abortion and sterilization. He published guidance which promises to enforce the Obamacare requirement that taxpayer dollars should not support abortion coverage and exchange plans. You could go on and on with it, including a recent one where people can say, well, look, he didn't sign on with a bunch of these foreign nations on coronavirus and everything else. What was the main reason why? It was abortion, because in there, abortion was a human right. And so you sit there and you go, look, he's not making buddies in this. Planned Parenthood hates him. Do you think that all of the vagina hats in Washington, D.C. was because he's just pumping them full of loot? I mean, I don't know what people are smoking to think this. I'm like, you can tell what somebody's doing a lot of times. In fact, Occam's razor would indicate this. You can tell what somebody's doing oftentimes based on how their enemy is reacting. So if their enemy is really ticked off and they're leaving programs and they're crying out for help from superstars and stuff to give them money to make up for the money that they're losing, you sit there and you go, to believe that really they're making more money this way, you have to add an extra layer of complexity to make your case. And I would say, tell me how. I mean, ultimately it's a conspiracy. You'd say, oh, so they're like working together, and it's like, really, don't you just make it look like you hate my guts, because really you're getting more money and more freedom than ever before. And that's just baloney, man. I don't know where these people are even getting this, other than neocon has-beens like David French.
Okay. What about his support for sodomitical so-called marriage? He's totally on board for the gender theory and sodomy.
Yeah,
another intrinsic evil that cries to heaven for vengeance.
Yeah, I would say this. There's you can go over to the Human Rights Campaign. A lot of people have seen some people may think that it's like, oh, I think that person's a lieutenant in the Navy. There's two little, yellow bars with a blue square around it. No, that is not what that is. That's not a lieutenant. That is Human Rights Campaign. And they have a list here. You can actually go at hrc.org, the list of Trump's unprecedented steps for the LGBT community. And it sounds really good, but unprecedented steps is in quotation marks. And they go through this long list. And here it is. He opposed the Equality Act. He appointed anti-LGBTQ judges. Now, these are the people who are activists in promoting this, by the way. This is their mission in life. He joked about...
So this is looking at the pro-LGBT people and what they say about Trump.
What they say about Trump, yes.
Okay.
That's why, by and large, the only people who are really in any support of Trump at all in the LGBT community, and I don't necessarily even like using that phrase, but for shorthand I will, is that gay men. Other than that, it's kind of hate his guts. Supported employment discrimination against the LGBTQ people. Submitted an amicus brief to the Supreme Court supporting discrimination against them. Banned transgender service military members from the military. Rolled back Obama-era non-discrimination protections. Issued a rule to license discrimination, talking about the Department of Labor. Kicked people living with HIV out of the military because of their status. Created a hostile work environment for LGBTQ federal employees. And I'm not even 1/3 of the way through. They've got an entire segment on healthcare. They have an entire thing on schools, an entire thing on housing. And these are in families, in representation, in the world overall, right? Embassy pride flags. So, they talk about Pence defended the State Department directive to ban embassies across the world from flying the pride flag during Pride Month. So even littler things like that, just pure signals, they're even against the signals. So if the complaint is you have, someone, you have ambassadors who might be gay or stuff like that, or his personal tolerance for that. Again, it's one of those things I don't necessarily fault so much as I do the policies that are going to ultimately affect the common good or disservice. And so I say, even on this score, if the enemy of my enemy in this case is Trump, Trump's my buddy.
Okay. Well, what about him separating children from their parents at the border, having this harsh policy separating these very young children from their parents? How cruel. He doesn't care about children.
It's, here's the thing about that. Even the way that question is framed, it's kind of like moderators at these major debates and stuff, the way that they frame questions. And it's commonly framed this way, that says he's separating children from their parents. That person saying that phrase doesn't know if those kids belong to that person, or if that person even has a legal right to, let's forget for a second whether they have a legal right to illegally enter our country, but do they have a legal right to remove that child from the home in the country of origin? If you're somebody, you can't just take your kid. Let's say you're divorced, right? Or you're not divorced, you're married, and you just go ahead and you take your kid and you decide, well, I'm going to move to a different state. I mean, they can come after you for kidnapping. I mean, you're legally in trouble. So we don't even know if number one, if it's if that kid is in fact related at all to the person that child is with. You don't even know. And so we need to be able, for a period of time, to be able to figure out and distinguish. Otherwise, it's faulting on the side of caution versus faulting on the side of saying, look, you don't want to separate kids from parents, and you find out the guy is a sex trafficker. Okay. And you're like, oh, well, I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And you're like, well, how about the kid that you just basically forced in a situation with a sex trafficker?
Well, how many of them are really in that situation, though? I mean, isn't that a small percentage? I mean, how much? And how many of them are really these criminals?
Well, for one, every single person who comes over illegally is already in violation of a law and putting their child at great unnecessary risk, almost every time, unnecessary for their survival. Okay. Not for their flourishing, for their basic survival. But even that question saying, well, what's the number of them? And you say, that's not how the law works. Okay. And it's not even how most conservative people operate, which is why it's weird that they're using such a liberal mindset with this question. Because let's say, for example, we're out in the woods and we're walking around and it's dark and we hear a stick behind us and it breaks, right? Maybe an apple fell and landed on a stick. Am I not going to turn around? What's the likelihood that it's a tiger that's going to ravage me? Well, we'll find out because it may be a tiger. So the basic assumption is to turn around. If you're incorrect about it, you just go, oh man, whoo. And you say, man, and you go home and you tell your wife, dude, I heard this stick. I thought it was some behind me. If you don't turn around and do that, you might get ravaged. Let's say, and even if you say, well, it's not often, and say, well, tell that to the lady whose husband never came home. And so the thing is that when it comes to law, we fault on the side of this to go, you can't just say, well, I'm going to presume that this person who came in here illegally and put this child at great risk, evidenced by death that we see in photos shoved in our faces of people who didn't make it across rivers or who drowned inside the ocean or whatever, that put them in great risk. We are just going to assume not only that that's the child, but that this person is not a rapist, that this person is not a felon, that this person does not have a number of disqualifying things, and that this person, we're assuming that they could even be able to verify that at all. And so those assumptions, when we're talking about law, is as much of a heart-wrenching thing as that is, to say it's in fact necessary and wise and safe to say for a period of time to separate them and to be able to ensure that that person they're going back to is not that person's captor. That is how we ought to be doing this. And so I disagree with the frame of that.
Okay. Now, what about, speaking of children, one of the biggest threats to children is pornography. And one of the best enablers of pornography is laissez-faire economics, wherein we sort of worship the beautiful constellation of the market, which beautifully enables all this good things to rain down on us. So it's enabling pornography to be accessible to children. Trump is fully behind laissez-faire economics. It's against Catholic social teaching. He also supports the two greatest terrorist states in the world, Israel and Saudi Arabia, in the global laissez-faire pornographic distribution, which comes out of the United States. So he's not against one of the biggest sources of evil and sin in the world, the multi-billionaire pornographic industry, through laissez-faire economics. I can't vote for him for that.
Yeah. Number one, I would say he's not into laissez-faire, which is why you got weirdo libertarians, these market mystics, and these free market fideists and stuff like that don't like him, right? These crazy libertarian folks that don't like him. They sit there and they say, well, look, he believes in tariffs. He believes in American economics. And by the way, if someone believes in American economics, at least the paradigm is in place where America can decide what is good for the common good of that particular nation. And it basically is an economic system with a flag instead of an economic system that just simply looks at the dollar sign and says, I don't care. Not even just the dollar sign, the whole concept of money, and that doesn't matter where it is on the planet. It doesn't matter. There's no other factor beyond the dollar, right? The money. And so if you start from a system of American economics, the very idea of American economics would include the idea of America and what is America, what is to the common good of our country and to our people and to our workers. And even that conversation at least provides a fertile ground for discussions regarding, is porn a good thing for our economy? Like, is that something we should do? Is that something we should ban? Which, by the way, I'm excited to see. And these conversations tend to bubble up, by the way, right? They tend to start lower and find their way up, at least when they're good and hopefully even successful for the long term. And you're seeing this rise in a conversation about what should we do about porn? And it's always kind of been there a little bit. There's always been a lot of flack, it's movies about it and stuff like that. And so, but the idea of, should we ban it, right? And not just put a slip over it to make sure little kiddies don't see it and stuff like that. But you look at it and you say, okay, so, but the underlying thing of sexual deviancy, for example, that goes with, of course, the pornography regime, right? You would say, okay, here's a good example. Say, like, how does he stand on that? Is he an adulterer? Yes, he seems to be a serial monogamist, and not even a monogamist. Sometimes he's married and he's with a woman. But at the same time, he did not find himself on Epstein's island, of fantasy island with Mr. Epstein, which is amazing because on the one hand, he's in the chart, in the log. On the other hand, the people who were there, including the ladies, were sitting there saying, oh no. And the workers, oh no, Donald Trump, no, I didn't see him there. He wasn't involved with that in any way. And so it should say something about him. The fact that he's not involved in the depravity with Bohemian Grove. I'm not joking about that. People should see pictures of the kind of weirdness and sexuality that's going on in these places. The fact that he's not involved in that. The fact that he's talking about families and about marriage. And in fact that he's putting judges in place. Look, if you get a pro-life judge in place, and that pro-life judge is also a strong supporter of the family, the nuclear family, which is under attack right now by the Democratic Party and Black Lives Matter, that if you have that, again, it's a fertile ground for that conversation, and that even the possibility for that to arise. And so if you want that, and you want to at least lay the groundwork for that, incrementally speaking, Donald Trump is your man.
What about the fact that the big business, speaking of laissez-faire, big international business is what runs Washington? The two parties are two sides of the same coin. They both have the same foreign policy, like we just talked about, which you didn't address, Israel and Saudi Arabia.
No, I forgot.
I'll frame the question. So Israel and Saudi Arabia, both Democrats and Republicans have the same foreign policy because they're both controlled by big business. So I want to vote my conscience. I don't want to vote in this wicked two-party system. There's just two sides of the same coin. So I don't want to vote at all. What do you say to that?
The people who don't want to vote at all because of the uniparty. Well, they would have to explain why the uniparty hates Donald Trump. Like, where have they been for the last 3.5 years? Where were they during the primary? Remember during the primary when he would go to these debates and you would have all these people in the crowd. There was one in particular where they were just booing like crazy. I think it was in North Carolina. They're booing like crazy. And he stops. And it was a powerful moment. He stops and he's pointing at all the individuals and he's talking to Johnny Q and Sally Sue on Main Street, right, in flyover country. And he says, do you hear these people? These people paid a large amount of money to be here. They have to have a certain amount of power and prestige. Most of them are lobbyists and they hate me. And it's true. It's true of big banks, which is why recently was a Politico came out and they were saying it as a matter of pride. Every single big bank supports Donald Trump. The military industrial complex. You want to see, not only is he going against the military industrial complex, not only is he outing individuals in the small group who were involved in one of the most outrageous crimes of the Russia hoax and Ukraine hoax in American history ever. Not only is he doing that, but he's bringing transparency to these organizations, which is why they want to get rid of Barr. It's why they don't like Durham. They're like, look, we got to get these guys out of here. And they're freaking out. So you want to look at the uniparty and say, okay, you know,
did you say that all the big banks love him?
No, the big banks love Biden.
Oh, you said they love Trump.
Oh,
you
yeah.
Meant, okay,
yeah, I'm so sorry. No. That's my bad if I said that. No, they endorse Biden. And that's the thing, like Politico, a far left organization, sits there and all these other ones are like, man, this is a real warning sign. All the big banks are supporting Joe Biden. And you go, yes, because of the way that globalism works, because the way that the deep state works, because of the way that the uniparty works. And that's why these individuals hated him and why Republicans who were swamp monsters par excellence, why those people really said over and over, we think you're in the wrong party. You shouldn't even be on the stage with us debating. And so he is essentially, and I was a national delegate for the Constitution Party in 2004 because I didn't have a job in New Jersey Republican politics for the rest of my life. And I was like, and I took this seriously. So I went down this road and I said, I'm going to support the Constitution Party. And essentially, I sat there and I said, all of the things that a lot of these third parties wanted, with the exception maybe, of course, of the progressive ones like Green Party and stuff like that, or the entirely insane, worthless ones like the Natural Law Party, or ones like the Libertarian Party that are in the cult, right? With Pope Rothbard and Cardinal Mises, that, with the exception of that, we're talking somebody who really did embrace that tradition that can be seen in people like Ross Perot and Pat Buchanan. And that's totally an outsider position. And so, again, the framing of that. Now, did you want me to?
So what about Israel and Saudi Arabia?
Okay, yeah. So Israel and Saudi Arabia, this is actually one of those things. Because people might be like, dude, you are literally defending everything of this guy. And this is one of those things that I won't. Because I am against this. I sit there and I say, look, I'm a realist. I'm an international realist. My geopolitical view is probably Machiavellian, right? But I look at it and I say, the Saudis, super bad dudes, right? I was really glad to see the 9/11 documents reveal, Saudi involvement and things like that. That was suppressed by the uniparty of Bush and Obama, which, by the way, both have endorsed Biden this time around. You want to talk about uniparty, but the thing is, and with Israel, the way that Israel treats Palestine, I think that there are good things about Israel that Israel has the right to, for example, preserving the integrity of their people and even their religion for their state. That is something that a nationalist program would say they have the right to do, just as any nation would have the right to do. At the same time, cutting off of water, certain things to do with the taking of homes, right? The bulldozing of facilities and businesses.
Spreading pornography.
Yeah, pornography. Yeah, a lot of that, and including like the way that they use it as propaganda to demoralize Palestinians. So there's real things going on with that. I also don't want to make little sheep out of the Palestinians. I mean, it's one thing to say you are under the thumb of a group that has significant amounts of money and significant amounts of power and military might provided in large part by the United States. So I would encourage people, this is one of those things. I would encourage Donald Trump. You should read the Israel Lobby. You should read the book, The Israel Lobby. It's a good book. And, but at the same time, I think that it's almost a double-edged thing, because I think that for stability of region, I am so happy to see that there are nations and people that are coming together and signing peace accords with Israel that in the past had been hell-bent on the idea of let's eradicate these people. And this is an ancient religious thing that it's beyond the scope of this. Okay. So just speaking just politically, the idea of seeing those groups come together that happened, a couple weeks ago, it was a remarkable thing to see the similarities between people who will criticize the president on the right and people on the left. Not for the same exact reasons, but to see that they are both on that page together and not being able to distinguish the wheat and the chaff, right? To say, you can say legitimate criticisms against Israel, then there are more than enough, and against the Saudis, and there are more than enough. And at the same time, from a realist perspective that emphasizes order to a region and peace to a region, to say even with the Saudis, better them than the people there. Like, Wahhabism sucks, man, and it's a really rough gig. And so, as much as I don't like the princes and the way that plays itself out, or the way that we spend money there, at the same time, it could be much worse.
Okay. Well, I want to vote my conscience. I don't want to have any participation in evil whatsoever. I want to not have any participation in non-Catholic, anti-Catholic, Protestant, who knows what Trump is type of politics. I want to vote the American Solidarity Party, because that party really exemplifies Catholic social teaching and really is representing my values as a Catholic.
Well, to all 5 of those people, I would say, it's your life, I guess. I mean, I don't mean to be rude about that, but I mean, it's true. You have, statistically speaking, you are bound to get them. And so especially in a republic, I mean, anywhere, you're going to have people like the bell curve, right? And so you got people on the edges and the margins and everything. And you go, okay, so collectively speaking, you guys are enough that you have maybe a couple friends in your life that also do the same thing as you. But by and large, that vote, other than helping you personally sleep at night for your own reasons, is the kind of thing that will only be known at all in history books of losers. So, and I'm not saying that it should be mean. I'm saying I used to be in the Constitution, not just a national delegate, but also involved with the state chapter, and saying that, I was really concerned about, supporting all the different candidates, having the signs out there. I worked on a couple campaigns with people and tried to get it out there, and wrote a lot online about it. Even when I was on TV for a little while, just as local television, but I was out there on television and on radio and on YouTube, talking about this stuff and saying that at the end of the day, it took me going to college and going for my minor in political science and opening up books that laid out the votes and the numbers of people who voted, and seeing way down at the bottom, the Constitution Party with a statistically insignificant number of votes, and saying, what am I doing? what am I doing? And to say, I believe, again, I think it's a balanced take. I believe that there should be greater access. We should allow it so that it's not a strictly partisan split with the way that the election committee works. Okay. So, because then they don't want any outsiders in there. So outsiders don't even really get to come in and debate unless they reach a certain threshold, which, by the way, is necessary, because otherwise you're going to get D's nuts on there. And that's a real guy, by the way. I'm not trying to be crass. That's a real person on a ballot. If you want that guy up on the stage, maybe you do. Happy fun time with that. But the thing is you need to have a threshold of respectability. Have they reached that place? But I still think there's things we can do to make access to it better, and things we can do with the American system that say, look, the way that we even cover it with the news and things like that, that would make it maybe a little bit more fair toward them and include them in that conversation a little more so that it's not, and that's actually a truth matter, because then you're not treating it as if it's a dialectic. Everything is just a dialectic between Republican and Democrat, because that's just phony baloney land. That's fake. It's not real. And so if there's more opinions than that, and some of those opinions are represented by third parties, I think that they should be part of that public conversation. If that ends up making it so that they're more involved, fine. But if you're trying to abstain from evil and you're saying, I can't bring myself to go in and vote for somebody that if I were to say, not only let's just stick with the one measurement to say, what do I believe is the actual damage that will ultimately be done by this person compared to the other person? And is there actually a difference? And are some of these things on non-negotiables versus negotiables? EWTN has an excellent article about that. And so if to balance on those scales and to really think that through and say, yes, to participate in this, and to say, look, is this person, is it really so bad that I couldn't vote, for example, for someone who may even be a Constantine type person? And how many people would you ever have voted for? And if you don't vote, if that's all you do and you go on, I mean, that's perfectly fine. You're a hobby horse enthusiast. That's great. But ultimately speaking, I don't think it's necessarily make or break, especially on the right. I don't know how many people who criticize the president about abortion are going to go and vote for the libertarian chick, for example. Nobody really cares about her. I've seen like one sign in the whole world. I'm traveling all over, Tim. But
okay. Yeah. Well, come on.
Yeah.
Trump is a racist. Trump is a racist. He failed to condemn white supremacy. Everybody saw it in the debate. He was kind of fumbling over his words. He didn't even know how to condemn white supremacy. What a racist.
Yeah. Well, this is an easy one. And it's easy for a couple different reasons. Number one, when you're talking about when the people making this charge and they say he's a racist, let's just take the people from the left, and you can take it from their convention and not the major stuff, some of the major stuff, but a lot of the stuff that was happening, with delegates and things like that and conversations that were happening. Tucker Carlson talked a lot about it. In fact, he talks a lot about this topic. So did Breitbart, and so have I. And that is critical race theory. Critical race theory is identitarian politics. Okay. Trump is not an identitarian. So we throw around this word racism, and just like they throw around the word Nazi, for example, that's just another, they're just extending that to the Jews. He has his son-in-law, which, by the way, I think that guy should be out of there. Get him out, man. Him and Ivanka, get him out of there. But Jews, he's got grandkids, Jews, signed a peace agreement. And in this peace agreement, he stands up and everybody's like, this is like a Hitler moment. I'm like, yeah, because Hitler loved doing, overseeing landmark peace agreements between the nation of Israel, the Jewish people. He's like, yeah, I'm really concerned about the peace and security of Israel, or of course not Israel at the time, but the Jews. And so you sit there and you go, that is the cuckooest thing I've ever heard. And it's kind of like the debate you said where he didn't condemn white supremacy. Yes, he has. In fact, numerous times. McEnany, the press secretary, did a marvelous job going through and showing all the different times. And this is a perfect example of this because she's listing off, and not all, let me take it back. That's just off the cuff. Many times where he's not only condemned it, but that he condemned it the same day that everybody's using, like, Kamala Harris using this idea of, he said there's good people. And he says right after that, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white supremacists. And then within days saying the exact same thing. And so, to sit there and to bring these up, to bring up his involvement with the Black historical colleges, to bring up the fact that he's and boasting of the idea, historical amounts of employment to Blacks, Asians, Hispanics, the number of Hispanics who support him, the RNC, the convention itself, how many people of color, basically unprecedented, right? You don't have this. More people of color being involved because he's a populist who actually cares about the people. He actually cares about Americans working. And there's a sense of pride that comes with that. Is he opposed to identitarianism? Yes. Did he come out and condemn the Proud Boys that day? No, he did not. He said, stand back and stand by. Yes, sir. Because I am a Proud Boy. And so,
now you're a white supremacist.
Oh, yeah, dude, I get it. People say it. And I'm like, dude, I'm in an interracial marriage. And they all say the same thing. They're all like, oh, yeah, well, just because you're in an interracial marriage doesn't mean you're not racist. And I'm like, that's only possible in the scenario, which is it is possible that maybe I married my wife because I have a fetish about dominating Korean women. And if somebody says that to my face, they better be glad they're just saying it over the internet, because I'd suck them. Right. Those are fighting words. And so you don't talk that way.
Yeah, you don't talk.
Yeah, you don't talk that way. But the idea is that he's sitting there and they're lumping in so many times, like we saw. It's the last thing I'll say about it. You can see recently there was the crazy lunatic, terroristic people who decided that they were going to privately collude. I believe so far it's 13. It may be more now. I don't know, but 13 people so far who have colluded together in private to basically create a civil war. They're ignorant of the fact that we're already kind of in one, but they sit there and they said, well, we're going to go ahead and kidnap, among others, Whitmer, right? Governor Whitmer. And the thing is when people write about this, a lot of these places, they'll go back to that debate and they'll say Proud Boys, and then they'll immediately talk about these guys, and these guys were not Proud Boys. But you can see the way that that's lumped all together. And the amazing thing is our international chairman is an Afro-Cuban. And the only time I've ever seen a racist organization, a racial identitarian organization, the white supremacist, that neo-Nazi that has an Afro-Cuban or any black person as its leader was on the Chappelle Show. And it's a joke because he was blind.
The black white supremacist.
The black white supremacist with the hood on. Nobody knew it was him. And he ends up divorcing his wife because she was a black person lover. Once he realizes he's black, he divorces his wife. It's a big comedy sketch. And that's why I look at these people who say this stuff and I'm like, you are the embodiment of that comedy sketch. And I can go on that all day long.
So Thomas Keller says, is it a mortal sin to vote for anyone other than the candidate who is both pro-life and the likeliest to win?
And the likeliest to win? I don't know. I need to be really careful about this. I'm not, I have my degree in journalism and political science. I did go to school at a Protestant seminary for a while for presuppositional apologetics and theonomic law. I went to a Protestant Bible college for a while for pastoral ministries and theology. But I don't feel like I have the kind of moral theological training in the Catholic Church to be able to say on that particular issue. I'm sorry, by the way. I wish I did. I should be studying harder. I try, but I don't want to misguide anybody and say something about that my own confessor would be like, Jeremiah, you shouldn't say that.
Yeah, you can take a look at the show we did last week where we talk about some of the moral theology. In short, it's not something that most people really can say definitively at all. Even, certainly not a layman. I mean, I gave my opinion last week, but it's certainly, mortal sin is difficult. It's certainly difficult to say it's anything like a mortal sin, because mortal sin, it has to be a lot clearer than a gray area like this. But I think that's something to take up with your confessor. You can watch the video last week. We did talk about a few authoritative texts on that question. So moving on. C. Groot says, Trump has a Masonic double-headed phoenix for his coat of arms. Is he a Freemason?
A double-headed phoenix? I don't know. No, I don't believe he's a Freemason. I think the one criticism somebody could have of him regarding like elitism and stuff like that is the old elite money, right? Like Rothschild money. Rothschild money. That to say that he has connections to kind of old world power. But I think people would need to read Samuel Francis. He has a great article in his book, Beautiful Losers, talking about the failure of American conservatism, where he talks about the upcoming populist revolt, and that what's going to happen is you're going to have the old elite guard that is rising up because of the technocratic global elite that has replaced them, the bureaucratic elite that's replaced them. And in that sense, it makes, Donald Trump definitely fits that mold. But I I don't know. I don't believe that he's a Freemason. I don't believe that there's evidence of this. Like you could have evidence, for example, that maybe, what is it, Pat Robertson and other people that you could look at them and say they're Freemasons, or Skull and Bones or anything like that. I don't think we can say that about Donald Trump.
Okay. We do have one judgment about the debate, and that is Jeremiah is white. He already lost the debate.
Yeah.
I guess that would mean we both lose.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we both lost. Yeah, we both got that. You have blue eyes, man, by the way. I've never looked staringly into your eyes.
Yeah, believe it or not, yeah. Maybe the tiebreaker here would be who has bluer eyes. Probably. You have to have blonde hair, white skin, blue eyes. Whoever has the most of that probably wins.
Mine are sunny sky blue. It's not like ocean blue. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know where yours stand, man. I can't really see. I'm squinting really hard trying to see that. I can't judge it from here. But I want to say this about this though, man. People, if they don't know what critical race theory is, and Donald Trump, by the way, banning critical race theory. Critical race theory is Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Marxist nonsense garbage. And it is the philosophical foundation for the identitarianism that is ravaging this country and balkanizing our country.
Could you break down what you mean by identitarianism?
Yeah, the idea that, for example, that you don't have to be, you don't have to do racist things or say racist things or even know you have racist thoughts to be racist because you are white, and it's just simply by the matter of that fact you are involved, whether you realize it or not, in white supremacy, and that you must be an ally. But being an ally requires you to, number one, to be silent, right? But yet also to be told that silence is violence, and to be told that you need to go out and do a bunch of stuff and let everybody know and be a strong anti-racist. And they use these phrases, by the way, that sound really great. It's kind of like the Patriot Act. I mean, who doesn't want to be a patriot, right? And yet at the same time, it's just marketing. It's all marketing, right? That's the way this works. But the identitarian movement is the one that puts everybody into that diversophilic box that says, the black guy in his Kunta Kinte clothes, and the white person dressed like Christopher Columbus, and the Mexican wearing a sombrero and eating some burritos. And you can't, if you're white, you shouldn't maybe have a burrito store in a town, making burritos and tacos, and that kind of a thing. Appropriating, I'm so sorry. All of that stuff that right now is ravaging our country, because when you do that, it's so artificial, and it really boils down to, blood levels. They can say, oh, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You say, so is it strictly like how you identify? Like, what does that mean? But the thing is that that is what is fueling so much of this intellectually, starting at the earliest years in school, because it's what's taught to teachers. And so the kids' entire lives, they're taught this stuff. It's at the center of the diversity, tolerance, and multiculturalism cult. And it's at the center of that. And it is kind of the epistemological grid through which they interpret the world, and where we get phrases like intersectionality and stuff. That's where all that comes from. And that Donald Trump is banning that. So the idea, and maybe he's banning it just because he loves white people so much. And you go, maybe he just loves everybody so much, and he's one of those red, yellow, black, and white, we are all precious in his sight kind of guys, which I think is more likely to be true.
And Andres Diaz says, when can discussing politicians be considered slander? Since they're public figures, is their good name subject to more scrutiny and therefore just to criticize and judge? This is actually, I did not, I don't have the quote pulled up, but Prumer in his moral theology actually says that subjects have a duty to speak with reverence towards their leaders. So even if we don't like President Trump or whoever, or even Biden's a senator, we should still speak respectfully, because he's still sort of an aristoi. He is a leader of this country, but they are certainly subject to more scrutiny, because with great power comes great responsibility. They have a duty to serve the common good. Any thoughts, Jeremiah?
No, I agree with you. And I've actually, I haven't gotten any flack from my listeners on my show, but I have gotten flack over the years because, you know, I for example, every mass that I go to, every high mass, when it's over, my missal that I have from the 1950s, at the end of it, it has a prayer for the civil authorities after the mass. Okay, so low mass, you know, it has the Leonine prayers, and then for the high mass, it has the prayers for the civil authorities. In that, I have genuinely prayed for Democratic presidents. I have prayed for Whitmer, our governor here, and not just to, you know, convert. The prayer itself is talking about that God would guide them in order to promote peace, fraternity, common good, prosperity, things like that, at all different levels, ranging from the federal executive all the way down to local city people. And I pray that sincerely. And I've said on the show, like, it's actually upset me the way that our governor has treated the lockdown, because I would like to see her get just trounced in the election, right? Which is one of the bazillion reasons why those terrorist dudes were so dumb, right? To say, like, they're like, we're going to do this before the election. It's like, dude, just trounce her in the election. It's just, you know, just make sure that whenever that happens, she's going to get crushed. But the idea is, I want her to get crushed on ideas, maybe mistakes that she made. But the truth is, when she's ruling at the time, okay, and she's in that place, I genuinely would rather have somebody in an opposite party of me that is doing an otherwise decent job than to have somebody that, for, you know, craps and giggles, I can sit there and mock and make fun of. I genuinely want the peace of our state. And that would require that our leaders, regardless of their party, that they do what is right and just and fair. And so I think that we need to talk about our leaders that way. I think Leo the 13th writes about that. And we can at least take those principles of that in responsibilities of Christian citizenship, that you don't just rip on prelates like that, and leaders, authorities, and figures. And in fact, there's even encyclicals that talk about how we should view them in a way almost like a, you know, fatherly, almost like that there's a family relationship to authority, and those in the state, because they like the parents have the rod, and like the church has the keys, the state has the sword, and it is a powerful symbol of an institution that God has allowed to be here for a very significant reason, and they play a very vital purpose.
Yeah, it's a good point. The Christian view of the state is that the state's authority comes from God. St. Paul said that about the pagan Roman Empire. I mean, it's going to apply to everywhere you go, even if you have an emperor worshiping himself as God and committing atrocities throughout the world. So we do need to reverence the civil authorities, no matter who they are, as coming from God. And like something that you brought up earlier, the Christian church is anti-revolutionary. We don't, in the sense that we don't revolutionize the way that the world revolutionized. We revolutionize with the cross. That's our method. Our method is not the method of Lucifer, who says, I will not serve, and I will just cause a bloody sedition and revolution. In that sense, that's the way of the world, the way of the Marxist. That's not what Christians do. We go to our deaths, and we are the leaven. That's what you're talking about. But to wrap this up, Jeremiah, the Democrats, the Marxists have been boasting that they're not gonna concede the election. Hillary Clinton has told Biden to not concede the election under no circumstances. They've already talked about, reviewing the election. Pelosi just introduced a bill of trying to remove the president already. That's like a last ditch effort. So what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that Trump is going to get elected? If he does, what's going to happen? What do the Marxists have up their sleeve?
Well, I don't want to say that, he's going to skate by, right? I don't want to say, well, look, he's going to definitely win everybody, because I saw a lot of people who were traumatized on election day 2016, seeing the results come in and watching them devolve into animals by the end of the night. Oh, we're doing okay, 99% chance. And then it was like, well, it's only a couple states. And then it was like, well, the main states we're relying on, they're coming up next. And then it was Detroit, come on, Detroit, you can do it. And then at the end, just toast, and their jaws are dropped to the floor. So I don't want to say, oh yeah, this is the way it's going to work. So I can't say for sure. I would have to say that no matter what, my position would say, play it safe. I'd rather have to be extra vigilant and end up just dominating than to be lackadaisical and get beat. And so that's the first thing. But what makes this difficult is that because of the condition that we're in this cold civil war, it's not the same as before. Wars always changed. People used to stand across from each other and ready, aim, and then they just walk up and get next in line, and you're like, oh, I'm dead. And so we don't do that anymore. And so now the fight really is at levels of power where the levers of power can be managed. And that we've seen that with the deep state, which is just shorthand for a permanent state, right? The bureaucratic stuff, unelected officials, spooks and all that. So we're there right now, and the Democrats know that they're hit, right? They've got a guy who's just a complete wreck. I mean, he just is. There's a reason he's not just staying inside every day, all day long, because he doesn't want to get coronavirus. He's sending his wife out there. Okay. So if his wife is going around and she's feeling okay to go and rally for him, but he wants to obey the stuff about coronavirus. She's a doctor. I don't know what necessarily she's the doctor of, but she's a doctor. We're told all the time. And so they've got a hit candidate. He's a wreck. And then, can't remember anything. And then you have a VP candidate who got completely trounced in the primary. She was very uninspiring. And she's the kind of person that at the end of the day was asked by Stephen Colbert in a really embarrassing moment. You could see it on Colbert's face that he's like, oh my gosh, he actually said this. He said, well, you said, Biden is a womanizer, that you believed the women and that he was a racist. And she's like, Stephen, it was a debate, like the plane from Paradise Island, like she's tattooed or something. And I'm sitting there thinking, what kind of sicko would do that and be like, yeah, I believe that you were molesting women and you need to apologize to them and maybe leave the race, or you're a racist and you did all of this and you're a wicked white supremacist. And then it's like, oh, well, yeah, you just say that stuff. So she really put it out there. So you have very uninspiring people, and they're already in a deficit when it comes to the Electoral College, which is why they want it gone. It's why they're wanting to do things like packing a court, and why she couldn't answer in the VP debate, which surprisingly Pence wasn't milquetoast. He actually, maybe in his milquetoasty way, he was like Pone Central. So it was amazing. I've never seen anything like it. I was like, he's the most relaxed. He's just kind of really relaxed and calm. But you can see it. He does a nod sometimes in his face, and you're just like waiting. He's looks like the guy from Johnny Quest or whatever. But he's but anyway, the thing is though, is that they know that for them it's actually going to be hard. And the way to fix this thing is to make sure that there is a significant amount of chaos. And that's part of the plan with the Bolsheviks, man, was to cast all this doubt on it and to say, look, we're going to change the rules to this, and to make it so that, well, you can vote, but it's 2 weeks afterward. I mean, it is literally begging for there to be massive, massive problems. And as long as the media is on board, and they're a bunch of spirit cookers anyway, so these people are real sickos. So, and they're all on board, that as long as they're all on message, and we're seeing that they are, then they can just simply frame it over and over and over as Trump is the problem, that he's not accepting the transfer of power. They're already talking about it as if it's a fact. And they're not even talking about the fact that for 3.5 years, there was no peaceful transfer of power. And so when Hillary says, don't concede, I don't think they really ever did. They may have said the words, but functionally speaking, they didn't. And last thing, to sit there and say, it wasn't just that Hillary said that. It's that there was a war game that was performed. And that war game involved people, retired generals, people from the deep state, all this stuff, former governors, former senators on both parties. And they did these war games as if they were running the election. Podesta, who was running the Democratic side of this thing. And they came out in every case, by the way, just to let you know, in every single case, violence, mass violence. So good luck, everybody, right? I'm not even kidding. This is not a joke. This is a red alert. In every scenario, mass violence. And you sit there and you say, well, what did they propose? And what did Podesta say? Don't give in. No transfer of power. In fact, preferring the secession of Western states over conceding. And you say, this is not a joke. This is where we are right now. And you say the group that's talking about seceding and stuff, that's the group that's losing. so on the one hand, I'm kind of confident. I'm hopeful. I believe President Trump is an amazing president. I think he's done amazing things. Perfect? No. The man for the hour, without a doubt. And I truly hope with all of my heart that even in a small way, that what I said tonight may help people. Not to love him, not to think he's the greatest dude in the universe or anything like that, but to say that given the circumstance and given where we are as a country and as a nation and what we hope to achieve as people who serve the Lord and are pursuing Christ the King, that they would realize that this man is for this hour. And so that's what I'd hope.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremiah. Yeah, it is going to get worse before it gets better. That's what seems to be certain at this point. So make sure that you are defending your family, have plan A, plan B, plan C, stock up both ammo and guns, as well as food, whatever you need to be the man. This is time for the men, the men of God to be shown. And if civil war does break out, it's going to be two godless forces, mostly, the godless left and the godless right. And the godless right has more weapons, but they're also godless. And many of them are not these pious Catholics who are going to shoot only when it is proper to shoot and that type of thing. So make sure you're ready for what's about to happen. We don't know what's going to happen, but it could be very ugly, could be bloody. So what does a man of God do in this hour? We pray, we lead our families, we protect our families, and we be the rock. That is our job right now, is to be the rock. I'm talking to you, men. This is your job right now, be the rock. So, Jeremiah, thank you so much for all of your back and forth. I hope that it has been helpful to people. Very nice to have you on. I hope to talk more soon on this channel.
And I want to say one more thing, man.
Go ahead.
You never brought up Corona.
I know. I totally forgot about that deadly pandemic.
I was waiting
it slipped my mind. 0.06% of people dying.
I
forgot about that.
Yeah. Because we've talked about it before on the show. In fact, numerous different times that you've had me on to talk about it. So it's all on record, things that I've said. And but let not your heart be troubled. Any listener who says, well, what does Jeremiah think about it? I talk about it regularly on my own show. And
yeah, definitely. Excellent. Well, let's offer up an Our Father for this election, for the peace and common good of our country, for our children, our wives and our children, our families, and for our special intentions today, which are the conversion of an unbelieving husband and all our French Catholic brethren fighting the good fight. So let's pray. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
In the name of the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit.